Good evening, everyone. Let's start out the day the right way. They really haven't turned anything today. We're going to make a tree, because I should be making more of these. These are actually a very good seller for craft shows. And what I'm doing, I don't mark any centers. I'm just trying to get, this is the area down here somewhere that's going to be the base. So that's mostly what I'm after, is that. To be somewhere in the neighborhood of where it belongs. These really only take a handful of minutes to actually make. That's a good project to start out with. And get our brain on track on what we're doing and all that good stuff. First order of business is to get it round, get the bark off of the majority of it. Just use my bowl guide for that. I'm going straight through the bark. This little sort of nibble is. That way I don't touch the bark in the head for the most part. That's probably about far enough down. We should have gotten rid of at least the majority. A little bit of cambium layer left there, but that's okay. We just sort of inspect things a little bit. And we'll sort of give this a bit of a cone shape. And that takes care of the first part. This is a piece of dogwood. Very hard. Got us a tenant. Give it that last little flick and locks it in place. Looks like we got crud in there. Don't need the extra dirt. Bring it up close. I'll still bring a tailstock up and I'll let that center it back in there. Still, tailstock stays in place the majority of the time for this. This is pretty much all spindle work. I do have a pattern that I've made. I'm going to start a little bit. Because I have a hole in there, up there, for where the live center hits. So I'll just mark it out. And we'll play that by ear once we get down that far. We might be able to get a little extra out of that. And my carpenter pencil's over here. I lay these out with my template by virtue of that way I don't get them all out of out of whack. So now it's pretty much all spindle type work from here out. I'll need my little parting tool. This is the practice of making combs. And I usually put a little ball or something on the top of these. This is kind of a no sand kind of a project. So this is where I practice cutting everything nice and clean, taking my time. The only place I usually have to sand is the top of this ball a little bit once I cut it off. The ball looks a little out of proportion. A little fat. Still looks a little on the fat side. I could end up with a hole in the top on that one. And just use the parting tool just basically to get rid of some material. Just makes it a little easier. It will go down a little bit smaller in diameter there. I cut it cleanly because the parting tool will not cut that clean. So it needs the spindle gouge to slice the wood down in there. cut cleanly right up to the rim. We'll go back down that little bit. This top one doesn't look right. That's a little better. And I started out just a tree branch. This is actually has been around a while, so it's fairly dry. You can do these in pretty much anything. Soaking wet to semi-dry. This is pretty much, I consider these the no sand kind of a project. It's all about getting your cuts right. Not leaving any real witness marks. And if you do, it's up underneath that top. These dumb things do sell at a craft show, though. That's good practice just to try and keep things even as I go. Not that it's super necessary. I just kind of step back and look, see whether I have my coves relatively close. It is a tree. There's no such thing as a tree that grows in nature perfectly the same whole way up, so it means these don't have to do that either. I do find that laying them out, though, helps in the situation of getting them more evenly spaced. In my pattern, the spacing becomes bigger as it goes down, which would be a natural kind of a pine tree. Which is sort of what you're replicating. You just have to keep in mind, though, it is a spindle gouge, so it doesn't like to take a big chunk. It also helps in there. Close the flute and all that good stuff. And the tool actually, especially with this dogwood, since it's so hard, the tool's in contact with the wood, the bevel's in contact with the wood the whole time. They actually have a tendency to start getting warm to the touch. So you gotta give it a couple seconds to cool off every once in a while. I did bring up some wood yesterday. I've been on vacation, so it's kind of days are kind of a little bit of a blur in a way. You get a fair amount of work done down here, but never can get too much done. Too thick. That's going to be our base of our tree. So somewhere thereabouts. Just a little slice and cut. Get rid of this bark. Can you sort of use the bowl gouge somewhat for this? You have to be very careful using the bowl gouge. You have more of a wing that you catch on things than you would with the spindle gouge. And I probably should get my half-inch spindle gouge because I'm going to get overhang there that's not going to be conducive to the small one. Whether it's sharp enough to do the job or not, it's another story. since it's the base, you usually leave it a little bit fatter. And more straight than I did with the other ones. That's it. There's no, like I said, there's no real sanding in this. The only sanding I do is knock off all these edges right here are very, very sharp at this point, if I did a good job. So I just knock them off. And we'll have to sand a little bit on that bead or the ball at the top yet. But there's easy time to finish things right now. I need a shop trowel. And these, for me, I'm going after the Richard Raffin approach to these, to where I just use beeswax. Could use a little bit of oil with it, but I generally just use the beeswax. And I made a little disc. The beeswax I have is actually a white beeswax. I don't know how they make it white, but I made a disc so that I could make it easier to get up underneath this in there. At least that was the plan. So we just get a nice layer on there. Put the towel down. He uses a sock to do this, to spread the beeswax out and melt it. I've been taught since day one that you shouldn't use any kind of cloth material around a spinning object like this. But to each his own. I do use a paper towel. Paper towel will tear rather than your fingers into it. Fair amount of pressure, and just let the wax melt. As you can see it melting. It's not going to give you no real big high gloss shine, but it just gives them a nice soft touch to the feel. Nice feel to them. Seals them up a bit. So if the wood is not quite as dry as what you would like it to be, maybe, it's still going to seal it up enough that it's going to let it dry naturally, or slow the drying process down. Less chance of them cracking in half or something silly. Because it is a branch, it still has the pith in it. That end of that towel's getting loaded with wax. So I'll flip it over to the dry part, then I'll go back over it one more time. Make sure we don't have any clumps of wax in there. That little disc worked pretty good. And of course there's some place it's got a little cutout in there. Just filled it up with wax. But like I say, it gives it a really nice, soft feel to it. It sort of brings out the character a little bit of the wood as well. So now we get to go down here and cut this off. I'm not going to cut it off with a parting tool or anything like that. I'm going to cut it off with a skew. And I probably shouldn't have raised the tool quite that high. Hopefully not hit my point in there. And we'll slow the speed down a little bit before we release it. Oh, this is cooperating. Some of them, when you release that amount of pressure on them, they have a tendency to go all funky on you. Very gentle here. Not the time you want to break it. You could use a trip to the grinder. That point's not very sharp anymore. The ball definitely could have been smaller than what it is, but no two are alike, the way I look at it. We use the part that's got a lot of wax already on it. And that's just about done. So we'll go down here and we'll figure out about where we want to cut it off. Probably I'll start down in here somewhere. This really would be better off if I would take the spindle gouge and slice down through the bark rather than using a parting tool, because it is uneven. Ideally, I'd like the bark to stay there. The parting tool won't necessarily That's what I figured this one was going to be, because it's still a little oblong. So I'm going to have where I sliced in, I'm going to have a little bit more that isn't sliced. We'll have to correct that a little bit. I think it'll work though. This is a parting tool that I would use for making dovetail tenons or something like that. So it's grounded at an angle, so it has a really sharp point on this side. You usually are able to cut down along there. And if I take a really nice little bite, nice and slow, it's a square-sided parting tool, which means that the top edge on this, since it was ground very recently, because it still had a burr on it, it sort of will act like a scraper going down along there, especially in this dogwood. The dogwood that I've done before, it cuts, surprisingly enough, the parting tool actually cuts it clean. So now we need to make that go in a little bit deeper. What I'm looking for is to knock off all the edges all the way around. You got most of that, left a little bit there. Should be fine. Another place we'll just give it a little bit of a sand in there carefully. There'll probably be a little bit of hand sanding. Maybe I got it all. Good. This usually wants to leave. I don't want to leave any real super sharp edges on the bark. This is bad. This is all right up here. It's not too bad. Got the little wax sticking over the edge. So now we can take it the rest of the way off and get on to something more exciting. And I just reach over, my elbows on the top of the headstock. I'm not necessarily trying to, I usually cut about a 1/16 of an inch out in the way. And even at that, I can just stop right there so it doesn't do that. Because once they get to that point, then they get a little wobbly. So there's our tree. Like I say, it's dogwood. These dogwood ones actually are kind of pretty. They're kind of a pinkish color in here, and then they have some of the white. I've gotten some walnut ones that are really nice. Okay. So now we're warmed up. That's what one of the professional turners told me one time. You should pick a project like that that's kind of like a warm-up project. When you first start your day, time in the shop or whatever, so that your brain's on the right track of what you're going to do and how you're going to go about things. I'm going to need that. Just lay a couple things off to the side. I won't need my little itty-bitty parting tool. In order to finish this, I need to sand the end of it a little bit. I guess I took that out. Just use a simple sanding pad in a Jacob's chuck. Slow the speed down a bit. Because all we have to do is take this little nub off the center. So it really only takes a matter of a couple seconds to do it. Could have turned on the dust collector. That might have been a good idea. So now we have a nice clean bottom. Like I say, on this stuff here is really simple to do. Some of the stuff it's a little bit softer. It doesn't necessarily cut very cleanly across there, so you end up having to do something with it. That will need to put our initials on the bottom. Something I don't necessarily always do with trees, but I've been trying to be a good boy and do that more so. So now we can get on to the project at hand, which has already started. I started this day before, I think it was. Just turned around to see what it was. It is a piece of cherry burl. It's got a pretty good place up here where the bugs got at it. A little bit of a crack there. We need to take this, we need to finish shaping it basically, somewhat. But I knew, starting and stopping on something like this, it's going to change on me. So I didn't get too wrapped up about it. I do have a line where that line there, if you go with the rule of thirds, that's about 1/3 from the bottom. So that's basically where what I've been taught. It should be about where the high point's at. I do still have a couple little flats on it yet, so we need to get them off. So we change things around, we'll slow our speed down and make sure everything is where it should be. And then we'll bring our speed back up to what we want. We know it's not round back in here, so that's where I'm going to start. I just have to keep in mind that I don't want to go down in here too deep because we are going to hollow this. I don't really want to touch this and when it's spinning either because there's too much of that crap there. Or it's not quite round. And probably from that, still got a flat. Shoot. I thought that flat would be going by there. Because I want to leave some mass back behind. It makes it easier to hollow that way. Still a little bit left. It's got some goofy grain that wants to pick some of that right up too. Huh. That's kind of weird. But it is a burl, so the grain, the curl, the wood is coming that way and it curls back around. So when my tool's slicing across there, it's actually sort of going uphill a little bit right there. And this is not dry either. It's not sopping wet, but it's not even really close to being dry. Finally. Still got that bit. Well, see what happens if we do a little shear scraping on it. That where it pulled the grain out, that would be, got some of it. Got a little bit of funky spots in it. Not totally worried about them. We'll hollow it out and I'll probably let it dry. I'll sand it a little bit and then we'll let it dry and see what these do, whether they create a hole the whole way through or not. Up in here, it's definitely probably going to create a hole. I'll be surprised if we can manage to hollow it out without, this goes up here, there's a crack comes across, and then it looks like to me that's a crack going down through there. So we'll see whether it survives. So let's give this a little bit more of a shape up here. A little bit more of a flowing neck to it. There's where our spindle gouge comes into play, because it'll allow me to make a better curve that meets one another. The next question is, will the spindle gouge do a better job placing that across there? Better. Still a little fuzziness to it. It's got some really pretty grain to it though, I will give it that. It'll just cause us some extra, little bit extra sanding in those areas. But it definitely has some very unique characteristics to it. And just hopefully this thing survives. I was almost tempted to fill some of that with some super glue, but I don't. If I do that now, whoops. If I do that at this point, then I won't be able to finish it tonight. That crack definitely goes quite deep. But it should be wet enough. I'm just concerned that this is going to break free here. Could send a nice big piece flying that we don't want. I don't like to try and do this, but we're going to do it anyhow. That means I'll have super glue flying everywhere. I'm going to spray the activator right down in that crack because I want this to set up down in the crack as well as everywhere else. That crack runs pretty daggone deep. dang deep. It is filling it. It's coming out the end. I can see that's going to be futile. Only time you ever see me spray super glue up close and personal when I want it to get down into a crack. That one, that crack right there is deep. Must be a hole in there somewhere, a void down in there. Let's run a little down that crack. Isn't as much of a crack as what it looked to be. Aha. Aha. You have one of them aha moments? It's filling that crack and I'm like, it's just keep disappearing. It was coming out the other side. So that is a void going the whole way across there. For sure. We'll give that a couple seconds. Make sure there's nothing on top. And I'm going to run some tape around that. For one, it's going to keep the super glue from flying all over the place. Number two, maybe it'll help to hold it together. Maybe. Nothing else, it's going to be a smaller, could end up being a smaller vase. I was at the dollar store last night. I almost bought a roll of it. They had some of that. If you've ever seen some packing tape, is what they consider it, but it has like strings through it. And I'm like, I haven't seen any of that stuff in years. But lo and behold, the dollar store had some. As my wife would say, we're too cheap to spend $1.25 to buy a roll. It was very small. It was actually wide. I'd rather have the stuff that's only like 3/4 or 1 inch wide or something like that. If I'd have that, I would put that on rather than masking tape. Like I say, it's just a matter of keeping the super glue under control. So we'll go down here and finish up this end, and I'm sure I have to move a camera. I didn't set that camera right place. Yeah, it's not too bad. So we'll work on making this end look a little better. Then we'll drill a hole in it. I'm not worried about this down here. I'll leave that there. Once we get hollowed down into this area down here, then I'll finish most of that shape up there. Right now we do need a hole. We need to clean up this top and make a hole down through it. I found something sticky already. Means there's super glue sticking out. So little cavities for the drill bit to start. Yeah, super glue. That's why the tape's there. That way I don't have to clean up too much of it. It always ends up on the handle of the banjo, for one. I could lift it up here. I don't know why this thing wants to get, this thing's, for some reason, getting dust up underneath here on this roller. I can't seem to figure out what to put on it to keep it from doing it. As soon as it gets a little dirt in there, it doesn't like to cooperate. So now we need a hole. I need a little piece of tape for that job. And we'll figure out where this drill bit wants to cut. So I just set it close to where the bottom is. I don't necessarily want it to be an exact where the bottom is. Just to get me a hole partially down through. Slow our speed down a bit. Use the tool rest. I'll bring the point of the drill bit right up to that center cone. It's just a matter of pushing forward. Definitely a void in there too. And amazingly enough, you're thinking that it doesn't drill a straight hole. It does. Actually, if I was to push left or right, up or down, or whichever, and try and drill an angled hole, it won't do it. It'll only drill straight. It may start to do it, but it's going to take a lot of force to hang onto the drill bit, the drill handle, and all that good stuff. All right. Now, we can start to shape some things up here. We'll use our spindle gouge. And we're basically going into the hole and going to the side. And I'll do most of this neck part up here this way. Before I reach for the hollowing tool. I can go fairly far down in there. It really becomes an issue of How brave are you to go very far? So I'm in to there. So that's from there down, it's going to start to curve away. Which is probably a good time. I can see there's wormholes there, and this black dark stuff out there, sort of like a bark inclusion, which makes kind of interesting. I'm going to get rid of my tailstock. And then we'll get our straight boring bar. And a handle. And then we'll open this up. Use a straight tool by hand. I don't put that in the captured part. There's really not a need for it. We do need to cut on center. We're about 1/4 of an inch thick right up here at the rim. It's a cone shape, so you're really working blind. So I'll be able to feel for a little ways. Guess I should bring my air hose over too, because that's what's holding me up in there. Always the problem with hollow forms is the chips. Trying to get rid of the chips. Still have a hump right here. Let me drag my air hose over quick. Not too much junk sitting around. Hard to get to my air hose. Did get rid of some junk though this week. Thank you for the follow, live to Chen. Probably saying that wrong. Even though this is a small, it's only a 3/4 inch, 3/16 cutter on there. Cuts very, very quickly on this. Because this, even though it's a burl, the grain's sort of running this direction. So when I go in and cut to the side, I'm cutting across side grain, sort of. I was just making sure that didn't totally get this smoothed up to where it needs to be, but it's definitely closer. Up here's where I could very easily have one of them oh shit moments. So what I'm doing down in there is going back into my hole that I drilled and basically going from the hole and I'm moving the handle over so it pivots to the cutter out. So I'm opening that cavity up down through there quite well. Probably 1/2 inch thick down in there, right around that neck area. But I'm gonna go the whole way down to the bottom of my drill hole this way. Probably a little smaller opening than what I normally. I'm not really able to swing the handle over there where I want to be with the straight bar. We should be able to get all that with the curve. So we're down in there. Try the tool rest up just a shade more. Because when the cavity in there is not real big, the bottom of this bar is probably hitting on the side of the vessel in there. Because it doesn't seem like it wants to cut down in there. And it only takes a couple seconds. As you can see, I was almost struggling to pull the bar out. Especially with wet chips, they stick to everything. So we didn't make a whole lot of progress depth-wise. Another inch or so to go. quit going so much. This is probably one of those times you could have the smaller diameter bars to do what we're doing, but we're going to get her done with the bigger ones because that's what I have. Because we're just about to the bottom. Didn't feel that I was. You'll know when you get to the bottom of the drill hole, which we might be there. Still dropping in. And I think we're at the bottom. Feels like it anyhow. It feels like I'm not dropping into that hole. We certainly don't want to make a giant size funnel. I should have done a better job up here though. That's something somebody's going to be able to see and feel. It feels quite thick right there, but I'm not gonna test fate on that. When we have something that's gonna measure it for us. So we'll switch over to our captured subpart. Make life easier, safer, all that good stuff. I guess I need a handle. Short handle works. These can be very time consuming, I think. People that do these a lot would tell you otherwise, but I guess it's one of them things that I just don't do enough of them. To get good at them. How are you doing this evening? So we're going to be cutting. Let's think about this a second. Curved part of this bar has to be out over the tool rest so that it. So far until we blow it up anyhow. So we'll use our trusty little gauge. Generally in the right direction would be good. Oh, I need the little Allen wrench. Life and pain. I did find after our conversation last week and you looking for a lesser expensive chuck, I did find one. We're going to say 3/8 is going to be where we're going to start. And it is a grizzly. If I was smart enough to be able to share my screen with you, I could show you, because it's a couple pages back. There was another one that pops up on the front, kind of like the front page. One of the first pages. That maybe would look like a better deal, but I would say it's probably not. Oh, it's a 1/2 inch, I mean 3/8. Let's start there. That there. Do you know what your thread size is for your lathe? Now, see the laser. Let's go. See if you're going to be able to see. Yeah, you'll be able to see the laser. Oh, maybe not. Widen things out just a shade. Okay. Well, they had, yeah, that's the most common, the two most common ones would be the 1 1/4 8 and the 1 inch. 1 inch is generally on the small, like benchtop type lathes, portable lathes, where this one has an 1 1/4 inch. Yeah, let me not lose my train of thought here. Grizzly, GR. Grizzly tools. So like I say, they have a bunch. Well, this page actually looks different than what I saw the other night. Yeah, that's a 3/4. A couple pages back. And I just go by the appearance of them. There it is. 4 jaw, 1 inch 8. Because if I look over it, it looks the same. What I'm looking for, it looks the same on the back as what mine does. It has the same wrenches that my dad has for his. So this is the right one. And they're actually cheaper than what they used to be. They're now at $109.95 plus shipping, of course. And that would get you started in the world of chucks. I didn't really look to see. I know when we got the one from my dad, it didn't. I think you could get 3-inch jaws for it or something like that. If you would buy that and you want bigger jaws, just let me know, because I think I have a set. I think I bought a set of 3-inch jaws for theirs for some reason, because I was thinking it would actually fit on my Vic mark. Yeah, I do have them, and they actually fit, but they must be. They did something different with them that the screws out of my Vic mark will not work on their jaws. I'd actually have to take and cut some off of my screws because they bottomed out before they clamped the jaws down. But this would be a good one for you to get started on. You got a piece of paper, I can give you the model number. It would be H6265. That's a 1-inch 8, and it looks like now they're direct thread rather than mine has an insert. And I think the last I looked at any of the Vic marks, the Vic mark was going to the same thing, which in some ways kind of screws you, because you can't just replace the insert. Like if you would upgrade a lathe, like if you bought a Vic mark and wanted to upgrade a lathe and got a bigger spindle, then you could have spent the $25 or $30 to buy just the insert, the threaded insert for it. But now everything's going to the direct thread. H Henry 6265. Like I said, if I was smart enough, or you could tell me, I don't know how. I'll tell you what. I'll just put it in the chat. H6265. At $110. Yeah, actually, you almost got me in trouble because I was like, wow, I could do that. Because when I go do stuff at our club, we're using all the lathes of that size. I have an adapter which goes from well, in this case, it goes from 1 inch on the inside to 1.25 inches on the outside, so that I can use my chucks on a 1-inch lathe. But this also adds that much hanging out, so you end up, if you have anything of any length, you end up with issues of vibration. Well, like I say, that's the one my dad has. I talked him into getting that years ago, and it has lasted. He's not had any trouble with it. He's never even taken the back off of it to clean anything. I just had to back off of my one, but just to see, because it was sort of felt like it was binding up a little bit, but it ended up being not the case. But okay, so 3/8. So if you can see the bouncing ball for the laser, can you see the laser? Yeah, you can see the lasers up here. What I wanted the laser to do is drop off. So our 3/8, according to this, which is really more like a quarter, we need to take some more out of this opening right off the bat. And let's throw our speed down. Might have been why I was having more trouble with the straight bar. I always forget that they don't really like the higher speeds. So it's just a matter of being gentle. The cutter will cut in both directions. It is a round nose cutter. This is one way. This is a safer way, put it that way. At least for me. There's people that'll do that. You could use this tool, the straight tool and the bent tool, by hand. But then you're really going by the feel of things. Definitely don't have a real smooth curve in there. But it was kind of concerning that almost looks like I don't really have the laser set quite where I should be. Cutting on that. Gonna back it. Down a little bit further that way, because we're really cutting more right on this tip out here. And that's set. Oh, that's why it's set. Ooh, that was set for 1/4. Let's widen that out just a bit. Make it a fat 1/4, closer to 3/8. I don't do this enough to. Yeah, see that drops right off. But definitely have left a bunch of ridges in there. I'm gonna try and clean them up a little bit. I do have sort of another tool to do that. Be a little safer. And now I'm just sort of dropping in the cavity that I had. And just sort of, it's not a physical kind of a job. There's really no body movement involved in this. The handle's tucked up underneath my forearm. And once again, we got to get rid of chips. The last thing we want to do is have the chips get underneath there, underneath that bar, because it'll make it bounce up in the air. And you're pretty much guaranteed when it bounces up in the air and comes back down, things are going to happen. And not the kind of things that you want to happen. I'll make sure I move. You'll see I'll keep moving the tool rest closer all the time to keep, less overhang the better. Okay. What I'm doing now, I'm basically just opening up that cavity in there some more. And the chips are right there. Chips try and come out, but they can't make it up over that hump. So they just bind things up. I'm going to keep on opening that up down a little bit further. The smaller the opening, the harder it becomes. This is all you get done doing it with hollow forms. Stop, blow the chips out. I don't think, I never really tried to blow them out while I was doing anything logical. I think before I get carried away, I need that one again. This is kind of a 3-tool setup for this. At least that's what I purchased anyhow. I think that's all he had. But there's also a scraper. It's not a negative rake scraper. It's just basically just a plain scraper. But it's going to allow me to clean up, because these little tools here, I usually don't have the touch, and I definitely didn't have the touch up here with that. So I'm going to clean up from like about here up before we go any further, because we're now down to final thickness up in here. So it's kind of a time to do it. I mean, my tool rest. The wonders of it is it's the same height tool rest. The only difference is I'm going to tilt this over on its side a little bit. And it'll, like I say, it is a scraper. So it's pretty much non-aggressive. Especially when it's tilted over on its side. It actually gives you some nice, really little curlicue shavings in that case. Okay, so all I gotta do is go around the corner a little bit more. Yeah. What I'm doing here is getting my brain in track on what I need to do as far as the movement of the tool. And that gave me what I was looking for. Sort of. I don't ever get I can probably work on that a little bit more. I've left what I do is leave humps in there. And the only thing I want these to be able to, somebody like myself with long fingers, they're always going to stick their fingers in there to see whether it's smooth and whether it's hump free and all that good stuff. do have to keep in mind, even though that's a scraper, it's still cutting. So it's, as I'm doing that, I'm making things thinner and thinner the whole time. So I think we're gonna quit right there while we're ahead. I'll lay this over here out of my road, because I will do it further down once we get down that far. Okay, so now we can go back in here and finish up some more of this. Should be able, need some room in there. I might have to switch back over to my straight bar for a minute or two. This is definitely a whole lot of fun to watch the people that are really good with these. This is a Trent Bosch system. I was out and did a class with him, I guess that was last year. There's the ledge. And something of this size, he'd probably already be done. So I can just sort of keep switching back and forth with that. Because that straight tool, once there I had enough room, so I just took out probably 1.5 inches, 2 inches down further, and probably 3/4 of an inch or more out to the sides. Just in that little bit. Where are we at? There. Like I said, I just keep bringing the tool rest up. Just as long as I stay beyond the curve, I'm good. Surprised nobody come up with a bright idea of putting a little air hose in there that you could just give it a, I think I have seen somebody do that. Run a tiny little air hose down along there and be able to blow the crap out as you go. So we're at our right thickness down into about there, and we start to thicken up some more up in here. I'm going to have to go back to my straight bar. My opening right in this area here is just not quite big enough, at least for my skill level, because I can't. If the opening is a little bit bigger, I could get over this way further to get the nose of this tip over here to the center point, but opening is just a little small for it. So we'll just go back to the straight tool and go in there and find where we're at. Further there, I should have moved the tool rest. It's a lot of overhang, a lot of forces going down. And I should have my flashlight, but I'm not sure. Ah, it is up here. Does it have batteries? Nope. I do have another one though. Because you can't see anything you're doing, so makes it worthwhile if you can from some time to time. Yeah. This one's even magnetic, so it should sit there. So let's see if we can tell where we're at now. We should be able to. We're measured, still only measured to there. But now now I can get the whole way down. So I still only want to go down. Probably should put a line on there. They'll get carried away. So we only want to go down to about there, measuring it, because I want to come back to there and wrap that down around a little bit more. And then we'll finish it up there. That's beyond. This is where it becomes exciting, and you can't, like I say, you're doing all this relying on the laser, of course, but if I can leave the tool in. Yeah, we can do it that way. One less step. Okay. Lots of wet chips. So everything wants to start binding up when you're in there. I do one other thing. Put my little extra little bar in the little thing over there just in case. You get to paying attention to what you're doing over here, and you could easily go out off the end, which would probably be pretty exciting. Not really, but you go back in there and open this hole up just a little bit. So I'm almost down to my measured thickness. Getting pretty close to that line. So we don't want to get carried away, and definitely don't want to blow it up, mess it up at the very end. So turn the laser off and conserve batteries. I'll go back to my tool rest. Lay this down. And we'll finish up this outside shape. And then we can finish the hollowing. A nice short tool rest, so we don't need much tool rest here. Issue is going to be getting close to the chuck, but we will deal with that. And I want my bowl gouge. If I do that with my spindle gouge, I know what will happen. Spindle gouge doesn't cut as fast. You have a tendency to push a little bit too hard on it. You just want a nice flowing curve, basically from that line down. No. And that's about where we're going to be. This one I could probably make that line go the whole way down and utilize the tenon as well. Maybe. We'll see how creative we get there. I'm going to clean that up a little bit. Make a little smoother transition. It doesn't look like it's totally smooth, but it'd be good. Yeah, somewhere in there, either where the shoulder would be, where the chuck jaws are, or even the tenon. Just looking at my shape, not necessarily loving my shape. It looks like I'm not. Looks like I have like a hump up here in the middle. So I want that to be right because we're going by that. surprisingly enough, it doesn't feel like it really has moved. A lot of times when you do these like this, you relieve so much of the tension in the wood that it has a tendency to get all wonky right off the bat. That'll work. Wormholes. Be curious when we get done, take that tape off, see whether it came through. Didn't feel like it did, but just because it doesn't feel like it did doesn't mean that it didn't. Okay. And we will sand this to a final sanding tonight, even though it is semi-wet, because it will move. It'll move quickly. I didn't bring that down. I did. Any of you are watching Richard Raffin, which is an outstanding turner, has written books and all that other good stuff to go with it. He makes these, he calls them like a pencil tube or something like that. It's, I can show you a piece of the, well, you really can't see it but much. But you start out with a block of wood like that. Now, in this case, the grain is running across here. Is running that direction. You put it between center, so all your cuts have to come in from the end on either end. You drill out a nice big hole, and you take these down. The one I did yesterday, I think it was, I went down to about 1/8 of an inch thickness, and you just let it, it's wet, and the growth rings are going like this. So as it dries, this thing literally curves over. It's quite interesting. There was a guy did a demonstration for our club that was doing them like that in some really nice big ones. And he was taking and piercing them to go with it. Feels like there's a bunch of dirt. Up underneath there, my articulating arm wasn't articulating the way it's supposed to. I wonder if I could get it to go that way instead. Maybe that'll work better. Let's try it. I don't like it. Arms, the articulating part's kind of trying to stick me in the side. I think I'm going to have to go back to my straight tool. Do a little bit of that down there. one thing, once you get down further, then the bigger the cavity, the less time you spend cleaning out chips. See, my bar hits over there. This is kind of like watching paint dry. Not really overly exciting. So. This laser. You see the dot when it's spinning? Hi, how are you tonight? See the laser dot on my hand? That's going to be the outside, and that's the references to where the cutter's at. Looks like it's a little bit out further than it needs to be. No, we're right on the 3/8 mark. That's generally what I'm doing. To make sure you can see what I'm telling you. The tip of that cutter is matching up with the dot, and the distance in between is how much wall thickness you have. There's also some really fancy ones that you could, if you were super serious on some of that stuff and didn't want to mess with a laser, you can replace this laser with a little camera. Yeah, we're doing all right. It sucks. The last day off. I've been on vacation all week, so back to the grind tomorrow. But yeah, that's the laser. As if you watch, I think you'll be able to. I think you can see it. Like when I come up here, you can see. Can you see? It's probably a little harder to see down in there. But when I'm down further, you can see the laser on the top. And what I'm doing is watching. I'm sort of standing parallel to my lathe, and I'm basically watching the laser. And when the laser becomes elongated on this side over here, then I know we're getting very close to our thickness, and when it drops off, we're there. We don't want to go any further than that. Like I say, there's some of them really good people out there that can do that stuff there without a laser. I'm not one of them. That's why that's not sliding. Put a little wax on it. A little cheap candle wax. Maybe it'll make it slide better. Oh, that's what it needed. Gets all gunked up with the wet wood. But if I got... See, I think my curve... I can't pull it out to see. Yeah. My wife's probably ready for me to go back. I cramp her style because I'm so used to get up and going to work that I'm up a little bit earlier than what she is. And Yeah, it's been a pretty good. It's been a pretty good week. He hasn't complained too much. But I spent a lot of time down here this week. It's set the arm going across the top. Well, you can't really see anything from the back. Let me change the view. We'll go strictly overhead. Maybe it'll give you a better perspective. Yeah, that'll give you a better perspective of what the laser's doing. Can even bring it in the shade. See, now you can see the laser. The laser's set to the tip. I'll pull it out here and show you. So it's all set at the tip. And I usually set it pretty much like on the corner of that cutter, because that's really where I'm cutting at. So the distance between there and there is about 3/8 of an inch. At least that's what I think I have it set at. Somewhere thereabouts. So that I'm watching the laser on the outside and it's matching up with the cutter on the inside. There's also we can replace that with a little, one of them little like lipstick cameras, and run that to if you had a separate little monitor, which is the guy that makes this system, he tries to sell you, he sells them as well. And what you would do is set the camera looking down on the cutter and then trace around there whatever wall thickness you want, and then the camera is looking down at your piece and it projects that up on the screen. I never tried it. When I was out there and took a class, there was a couple guys wanted to use it. Yeah, well, this bar that runs across the top is what. Why doesn't the bar show up? No, because the camera's not that far out. Once I put it in, be able to see. Widen things out. There you go. I actually have to move the camera further forward to see it. What it is this is parallel to the bar, so to speak, and then this laser is directly above the cutter, facing downward, if that makes sense. But it does a pretty good job. I really haven't been brave enough to try anything of any size. Most of these guys that do these by hand without any kind of laser guide, they'll sit there and do that and tap along it. And I can tell you the unfortunate part of it. It ain't cheap. As you'll find out if you get involved in this wood turning world, there isn't much things that are inexpensive. Except usually the wood. As long as you're willing to work with green wood, wet wood. There's several different manufacturing people. Mainly, there's no real big manufacturers that get involved in this stuff. It's usually pretty much small time people. Like this guy here, he's from Colorado. And like I say, I spent the money and went out and took a class from him. 3-day class. This is a lot of what we did for 3 days. Start with things that are much more open and then work our way down to something like this. Well, there you go. Nothing wrong with that. That's where we all started. I don't really know many wood turners that didn't start out turning pens. Quick and easy project. The last little bit down here, usually where it's, to me, it's a pain in the ass. Because we have our cutters hanging over the tool rest by 7 inches, something like that. So there's a little bit, has a tendency to be a little bit on the bouncy side. Maybe my cutter could use a little sharpening. I'm going to end up switching back to the straight cutter to get down into there. Because the curve on this one, or I should say the smaller opening, if the opening was bigger, I could actually tilt this to the side more and actually cut straight across the middle. But I'm running in, the back part of that curve is running into the side of the vase, so I can't get right straight into the middle. I'd like to, but I'm a little bit concerned that I can get it to go in that hole, but I'm up tight against the neck over here, and I'd rather take the time to switch back over. We got just about to the right wall thickness out there. The laser's just becoming elongated. And if the bottom of this is a little thicker than the rest, why, that's not a big deal. Actually, it's a good thing that way. It's more stable that way. So the real question is whether we're brave enough. I have been using the straight bar strictly by hand, but I need to make a, if I can find dead center in there, I think. Let's see if we can make a little bit of a cut there. There's where I struggle, because I'm trying to get this This will bore a hole, but getting it to be dead center in there is the challenge of the day. Because I'm below center on that. You can see the line. So what I need to do is literally go underneath that center point and lower the handle, lift it up a little bit, and it should come up through that center point. But it's very hard to do in there, at least for me. I'm probably going to end up putting it on the rig because I can't. No, actually, I haven't gotten it out of there. I don't think it's. Yeah. I think we'll just take the 2 minutes out and take it out because both these bars are working. Well, all three of them actually will work in the captured system. Like I say, there's just not enough room in there for the curve. Once I get this out here, I'll explain it a little bit better. So if I had more room, and the room is probably more so back here, the face shield down so it doesn't stick in front of the camera. Because what happens is I'm getting over here and I'm rubbing back in here, up in here, because otherwise if it was open enough, I could get that around to where the front of this cutter would cut down there in the bottom. But I can't because of the way it's set. So we'll go back to the straight bar. Now I'll have to fart around with the laser a little bit. Get that on our tool rest, and I want this tilted over. I want it tilted over just a little bit, a slight cant to the side. Makes it a whole lot less aggressive. And then we'll be able to set our laser to the front tip of that, the front left-hand side tip. And then we will know should know where we're at, put it that way. So if I cheat and use the platform, and our tip is basically sitting there, so we'll just adjust the laser. Don't ask me how this laser actually works when it comes to this part of it. I might have to move the arm, move that back a little bit. The laser has some adjustment to it, fine adjustment to it. Not that far. Where the laser goes way out there, too far back. Doesn't like to slide, it's on there and it's sort of pinching it. Let's see if we can get our laser back over there. The laser has two tiny little set screws on it that allows me to move a pretty good distance in two directions. As you can see, it's wheeling it right in there. So we need to go over in about there. Move it out a little bit. And that should give it to us, I think. There's tilted a little bit in the wrong direction. Check it one more time, make sure. That's why you check it one more time, because that, whatever I did. That line, want that line right there, and that would be right there as it's sitting would be less than 3/8 of an inch. So we'll go to there. Squeak it over this way just a little bit. I do have another hollowing system, but this one is really is far superior to the other one. Oh. You were a lot further down that hole than what I thought I was. So 3/8 of an inch. Oh, wait. So I don't want to go down much further depth-wise. I just need to get, as I move this across, or maybe there's not as big of a hump there as what I thought there was. Let's try and clean that up a little bit right there. I was doing better than what I thought I was. The way that reads, I don't need to take. So I thought I was still thick right down in there, but I'm not. And we're actually below that, so that's 3/8 of an inch above that, so that's up in here somewhere. So if I just finish that last little bit off, that's going to leave me about ½ inch or a little better on the bottom thickness. I think that's good. Much all that work for nothing. Changing that over. But that is what it is. I can just move that off to the side. And I can go back to my teardrop scraper. It's on the same curved bar. I could put it back into the handle or into the captured system, but I found that this one it's just as easy to use this one by hand. I'm not taking a bunch of material. Well, I would be lying if I said that I didn't already. I've blown a couple up. And it's mainly because you get carried away on things. Like right here, that scraper, even though it's a scraper, it removes a bunch of material quickly. So, really didn't want to lose my chucking point. Let me get rid of this off of here. The other thing, it has a stop collar on there. So I took the time and trouble to set this so that the cutter is cutting on center. So that was kind of the one thing that kind of sold me on it, that it was You know, you didn't have to do a bunch of farting around each time you went to use it. And you just put it, sort of slap it on there and go to town. Which is one of the things I liked. I didn't like the price tag, but that's always almost everything you do in the wood turning world, especially when you get into any kind of specialty stuff. I mean, you're looking at pretty much everything's $500 or more. I did put some super glue down in here before I started, which I should have done that yesterday. Would have been better. Of course, the other scenario is, do I fill that little void in with something, or do we just leave it alone? My tendency is always to do something with it, but if I tap on it, down in there is definitely thicker than up in through here. Not a ton, at least by the way the laser read. Let me put some things away so I don't lose them. Vermin holes. Go get my little pick. I've been doing more than enough of that this week. I've gotten a bunch, I shouldn't say a bunch, I've gotten some stuff ready to do some casting. And it's actually more of this cherry burl, but lots of wormholes. Gives you an idea right there. That goes a whole way through right there. So that gives us a good idea of how thick it is. A little ventilation for the vase. So that's definitely one that we can't, well, so there it goes through too. So we can't fill them, for sure. Because my fingers ain't long enough to reach down in there to put a piece of tape or something to keep the filling material. And that one's all the way through too. I don't really care that they're the whole way through. I just don't want to leave the bug goop in there. More importantly, make sure that I get the whole way down in there and the fearless little bug's still not down there. Be life's most embarrassing moments to sell this thing to somebody and they come back and say, hey, why is there white powdery stuff showing up on my counter? It's like, that's because there's trusty little bugs in there that decided they should come out. Okay. Let's give her a sand. All right, that's 400. So of course we're going to capture our dust. And we'll slow our speed down considerably. Not colored glass, but I do the resin. I can show you one that I was working on this week. The resin, doing some of the stuff with the resin, not quite sure what some of those people do with it. For one, the wood has to be dry, which is half the challenge. Now I can tell you one thing. I mean, there's nothing in it. Like I say, there's nothing in the turning world that's cheap. But get into some of the resin casting stuff, and it escalates in a hurry. Pretty much everything in the resin casting department, you can figure almost everything's $100 a gallon. So that was 120. Unfortunately, some of that's only half the battle is the price tag of the resin itself. I use the Alumilite Clear Slow, which is a urethane resin. So I'll show you some pieces that I did cast this week. They're not going to look impressive because they're just cast, but the preparation of the wood, just to be able to cast it with that, is very kind of time consuming, and also adds another expense to it because all that stuff, at least how I do it, and that's how I was sort of taught to do it, is all that stuff is stabilized so that you eliminate the movement of the wood. That one there is tempting to fill, but I'm not going to be able to fill anything else. I'm not going to fill that one. And even though this wood is semi-wet, you can still sand it. As you can see, the heat generated from sanding dries out that layer at the top. That allows me to sand it. I can pretty much guarantee you by tomorrow or the next day, this stuff will have moved enough that this thing will be out egg-shaped and everything else, and then it becomes very difficult to sand. I am sanding in reverse. Just does a better job for me dust collection wise. That's why I'm sanding on the top, not underneath. Oh yeah, I'm right there with you. Even though I sell some of this stuff, you just don't really sell enough to totally cover the cost of the hobby. I mean, I'm doing better than what I used to as far as that goes, but oh, thank you for the sub there, Codes. How's my little pumpkin doing tonight? That's my son-in-law. So that was 320. Yeah, looking kind of pretty. We'll see here in a minute. Once I get done with this group, we're going to spray it with some alcohol. And that'll give us a real good idea what it's going to look like once we put a clear finish on it in a week or two. We'll definitely leave this sit and dry. I'm going to finish that bottom off. Got a sand in there too yet. Turn the dust collector off. I don't want to suck the alcohol up into the dust collector. It's got some character to it. That's what it'll look like once it's finished up. Might not be quite that shiny, but it'll be close. It does. It is sort of a burl. At least the guy that gave it to me said it was a burl. Yeah, it's got the nice compression lines. So the alcohol showed us what it's going to look like um, when it's finished up. But it also, alcohol helps evaporate the water. That's one way of drying some wet wood too. Not my preferred way of doing it because once again, it's too damn expensive for one. I mean, the denatured alcohol is not exactly cheap anymore. It used to only be like $15 a gallon or something like that. Now it's 20, like everything else, it's like 25 or something. Two ways to sand the inside of this. We could be really brave and stick our fingers in there. Not necessarily my preferred way of doing it. But just a simple piece of dowel rod with a slot cut in it. Slot could be a little wider for that sandpaper. Then I'll just wrap it around and see whether we wrapped it in the right direction. Did if I go in reverse. Ah. I wrapped in the right direction to go the other way. does clog up the sandpaper quite quickly, though. It's also going to allow me to get down in there a whole lot further than I can with my fingers. And a whole lot safer. Remember, there's a little bit of a bark inclusion right there. It's more of a better reason not to do it by hand. I wanted to grab that sandpaper quickly. One more grit, and we're going to call it good enough. I think that's good enough. Okay, now the fun part. Let's see. Now I gotta figure out, come up with a logical way. That'll be it right there. To hold this, to be able to finish off this bottom, or at least some of the bottom, because we'll go back to between centers. Now finish off that last little bit of the bottom. And as well as make that tenon down there quite a bit smaller. I'm going to leave, at this point I'm going to leave the tenon on it though, because I know very good and well that as this dries in the next week or so, it's going to need probably need a little bit more sanding and that. So I'll leave a good place for me to be able to get a hold of it, be able to do something with it. This is homemade too. This is resin. It threads right onto my live center. Kind of a sacrificial cone center. Some of the things I do, that's why there's some big hairy looking scratches on it. That I'll cut something right down into it. Of course, once again, we're not out of the woods of destroying something yet. Because now we're just going to put enough pressure in there. I don't want that to hang on. Need a little bit of padding in there. AKA little piece of router pad, non-slip pad. Just so that we don't leave any marks in there. It's not the end of the world really if it does leave a mark or two in there, for sure. Get it back into the cleats. Just enough. That's more than enough. Maybe not. Just enough pressure on it so that it doesn't spin. Would be the ultimate goal. Because if I put too much pressure on, we know very good and well that we could break it. So do we spin? Ha! We actually spin true. That's kind of amazing. So, there it is. Laid it down where it doesn't belong. So I'll go back to my little spindle gouge. This will take a little bit longer to do the job, but it's also a little bit less aggressive. Right kind of down into that corner. And then we're going to take this tenant and make it considerably smaller. I think we need to tuck that down just a little bit more. That's why also I was tapping on with my fingers on that right there to make sure that it didn't sound like it was hollow right there or thin. Oh, I got better. Probably, if I had known I was going to run that true, I could have waited and sanded everything at one time. But it's all good. We'll just sand that last little bit and we'll be good. I have this big mix mash of sandpaper here. Trying to use up some stuff that I got in a like bargain bin kind of a thing. So it's all kind of different, more industrial kind of sandpaper. We'll just use some of the good old stuff that I normally use. We'll go in reverse. Dust collector on. The reason I switched directions there was a little bit of like picked up grain right there. If I switch directions, it'll help to get underneath that picked up part, which it did. So now we can just go through the grits. As a place where I ran my fingers across there, I could feel something that was kind of jagged there a little bit. Gives you an idea how little pressure I have on that. This is just a stem center, and I can move it, that it's not pushing that hard on the jaws. It doesn't take much pressure to be able to sand on something. Turn Dusty off. There we go. Simple little vase. And it's not very big. It's going to finish out about 6 1/4 high by 3 1/2 wide. Its widest point. Nice little, make a nice little dry flower vase. Thank you. It's always nice when a plan actually works for a change. Okay, before I forget it, I'm going to go turn my compressor off because we're done with that. I'll go to bed here in a little while, and middle of the night, as all compressors, they leak and they don't have noise, and we don't want noise in the middle of the night. Now, I'm just going to show you the casted pieces. If I can remember what I did with them. There's some box elder burl. This has been dye stabilized. Another rather expensive proposition. This is another piece of the cherry burl. It has a piece come off of it. These are all like worms and cracks and everything. I just opened them up more yet so that the resin will flow down in there. 2 sides of it, the bottom, more so on the top. This piece was stabilized today. It's just stabilized natural, no color. So this will go in. I didn't bring the mold. There we are. So this will go in this mold here. I'm trying to think which way I figured I was going to do it. Probably that direction. This is a homemade mold. The red stuff is that tuck tape to keep it from sticking. Oh, let me tell you what, a smaller workshop is worse yet, because you try and put things away and all that good stuff, and yeah. I'm still looking. I have a little straight pick that's metal that I bought at Harbor Freight in a set, and I use that. I was making a bunch of these little lanterns a while back, and the little battery operated tea light, this gets opened up, but it gets put in there, and I glue that in with a little bit of 5-minute epoxy, and that's what I was using to mix up the epoxy and spread the epoxy in there. But That's in the land of missing. So this probably maybe someday this week yet. I have a couple little blocks of plastic, HTPE plastic. So I'll get this positioned about where I want it, and I'll take them 2 little blocks and probably stand them up along the side and take some tape and wrap some tape around, because this thing will float in resin, even though it's quite heavy. And then that thing will get totally poured with resin. And I don't have any of them. But here's the smaller size. These are actually ready to turn. They call it tuck tape. It's just it's a plastic tape. It's a very smooth plastic tape. I'm not sure really what they use it for. You can use the Tyvek tape, things like that. Tyvek tape is considerably more expensive than this tuck tape. I will spray it with a mold release as well, but I haven't had any trouble with it. Now, I don't know. I have about, I probably have almost a gallon, maybe a little less than a gallon of the Alumilite urethane resin left. I'm going to use that up because I have 2 of these to do, and I probably have some more of the smaller ones to do. And then I'm thinking of maybe trying out the epoxy, the deep pour epoxy resin. They were saw cut. It won't show you the colors. See if I can. I'll just pick it up and let it get really super close to you. This has the color shifting powder and flakes in there. So they're quite interesting. This one's really colorful. If you can get it to show in the right light without a glare. That'll be the projects here in a couple weeks. These will get turned into bottle opener handles. Is what I make them for. That's the mold that I use for them. This is a plastic mold. I'm getting some moisture showing up. I drained my compressor today, so I don't know. I'm not quite sure what the deal is. The white is only on the top, and this gets trimmed down. Yeah. Yeah, but it's like I say, it's actually a very expensive proposition. Like I say, everything you do when it comes to the resin is at least $100 a gallon or more. You know, the cactus juice to stabilize the wood, it's close to $100 a gallon. And the little blanks like that, they don't drink so much of it. But this one here, it was in a plastic container that's a little bit bigger than this. I had this about 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch above it, which is what you need. Then you pull a vacuum on it and sucks all the air out of the pores of the wood, and once the vacuum is released, it sucks the air or the resin back into it. When I let the vacuum go, it dropped that 1/2 inch and then some below that I had to put more in, and then I let it sit overnight, and then that gets baked in a toaster oven for several hours. About 2 hours. I think I baked that one. Oh, I left the mold over there. And it is very different to turn as well. In some ways, it can be very messy because it's stringy. That's one of them things where I either use a shop vac or I have a cyclone separator on my dust collector here. I probably would just use the dust collector to collect the strings. Because any place, like on these, these won't be too bad because once you start to turn these round, yeah. Oh, it doesn't take long. I mean, just to fill that little bit up there, this is all weighed out in grams. That took about 60 or 70 grams of the resin to fill that void up. I fill it up a little fuller. I mean, it's been sawed so that it's square, but these look pretty neat when they're done. But once again, it's another one of them things of they're not a piece that I'm going to turn and give away. They're on the market there, but they're not a real big seller because, you know, how many people, first off, most people look at things like that and say, well, what do I need a bottle opener for? I'm like, you don't get out much because there's so much stuff nowadays that is going back to the pop off kind of tops on things. Time is it? It's almost 9 o'clock. It's time to call it a night. But here's another one that I was working on earlier this week. This is the epoxy. This piece has not been stabilized. So the epoxy, I put tape along the edges so it doesn't run all over the place. And this is just a simple Alumilite clear, what do they call it? Amazing clear cast. It's just a 2-part epoxy. Mix it up, pour it a little bit in, heat it up, heat gun, get rid of the bubbles, pour a little bit more in. Same thing all over again. So that's a piece that's another piece to turn. This will become a lidded box of some sort. I didn't fill this one big void over here because I'm thinking my lid's going to be cut off there, and then I'll just cut a little extra off here. I just kind of got tired of playing with the epoxy because that is very time consuming. Because you pour some epoxy, you do one side at a time. You pour a little bit, you heat it up, pour some more. You know, it's all right if you're down here working. That's not a project to do like during the week where I would only have an hour or so to mess with something. But I will turn that around one of these nights this week, maybe. Some other ones. I think the other ones I put all that stuff away. I don't do a lot of casting, but it's another one of them scenarios. When I do it, I usually do a bunch at one time. Just by virtue of you get all the stuff out, you know, you just kind of go to town on it. And then you just put it away for a rainy day. Oh my God, yeah. Yeah. Believe it or not, there's a piece of wood in there. This will be a lid for something. Here's another one of those types of square blocks. This is box elder burl on either end. This is all resin in between. It'll look totally different once it's turned around. Here's a piece that's actually ready to turn. This is buckeye burl, and then the blue resin in the middle. What else we got goodies wise in here? A little bit of burl down there. This will be like a little miniature vase is what I make out of them. Here's the best ones. Piece of cholla cactus that's been filled with resin. You make a little lidded box out of them. They're kind of fun. The ladies seem to like those. At least some of them do. First two of them I made. I sold them within an hour. I took them upstairs, and my wife was on with the girls in her painting Zoom that she does, and they're like, "That's mine." I said, "Maybe you should ask how much that mine is first." And they're like, "I don't care." And I said, you know, they're $50 a piece. Man, bring them along to, they were going to Las Vegas. Just bring them along out there. They're sold. Okay. But other than that, that's it. I got to go sit down and relax a little bit and pack a lunch for tomorrow. I didn't bring my other tube down. If you like to watch wood turning, the name Richard Raffin is an interesting one to watch. This is just a little tube. This is basically the same as that big piece of wood I showed you. The grain is running this direction. This thing is less than 1/8 of an inch, probably pushing a 1/16 of an inch thick. This one's short. It really didn't move much. The one I have upstairs is about that long. It curved big time from yesterday. And it probably will continue to curve until it dries, which is the appeal that he likes. And I think they're kind of neat. They're challenging to do. That's the part I like. Oh, yeah. Well, I have plenty of them that do that too. Yeah, that's for sure. This is also streamed on YouTube as well. If you watch it on YouTube, if you hit that trusty little subscribe button, that would be great. Other than that, YouTube people, you have a good week. And I'm going to see if I can find somebody to raid into on Twitch. And then we will call it a day.